analysis and risk management, the case studies. If you're new to our webinars, I'm the regular presenter here. My name is Michael Trumper. I'm one of the principals here at Untitled Institute, excuse me, and have been in the area of project and risk management and software development for almost 20 years, and been with Untitled Institute since its very beginning. Before we start, I'd just like to go over some of the housekeeping. It's how you can participate in the webinar. You have to excuse me. On your right-hand side, you should see a pane there up on the top. Allows you to select your audio. I always recommend using the mic and speakers for the computer, so you get that VoIP. The quality tends to be better. You can also ask questions. As the webinar goes on, we'll sort of stack them up. And we're not going to answer any specific questions unless they're of a technical nature. I can't hear you. I can't see anything. We'll try and remedy those if we can. However, the other questions we'll wait till the end of the webinar, and we'll answer them in the order they came in. So I'm hoping that this particular webinar will run fairly quickly. We're not actually showing the live software on this one. It's just PowerPoint slides. So I find using the software itself always adds on some time as we switch between screens and add data. So we should be going fairly quickly. Again, we're generally an informal presentation, and we like to do it on topics that are being brought to us by our clients or customers. One of the common questions, and the reason why we're doing this particular webinar, is excuse me. Well, someone will ask something to the order of, while I understand what the software can do, how are companies actually using it? And it is an interesting question because we have several different versions of the software. We can see them right here. We have RiskyProject Lite, and I've put with the MSP Addin because that's going to be one of the case studies. Obviously, it comes with all of our desktop software, RiskyProject Professional, and we have RiskyProject Enterprise, which is a combination of a desktop software and a server backend. So it's a client-server application. And what we've seen over the years is we're getting a variety of customers who are using the software in different ways. And what we wanted to do was present that and perhaps give you some ideas about how you might expand the use or extend the use if you already have it in your organization. So the first case study we're looking at is with RiskyProject Lite using the Microsoft Project Addin. So right. It's this particular one, it's a large defense contractor. They have a contractual requirement to perform schedule risk assessments or analysis. All their schedules are in Microsoft Project when they're doing the analysis. They could have started off somewhere else. They might have been in Primavera, but the application that they all end up in is they end up in Microsoft Project. 2010, most of them are 2010, 2013, some of them are now in 2016. Schedules are of varying size. Generally, they're big schedules. They include master projects with many sub-projects. The largest one that I've actually seen, I don't think it's the largest one that they have, was a master schedule with 13 sub-projects with lots of inter-project dependencies. So lots of links between each one, which has been problematic. And it was north of 25,000 activities all told. They have hundreds of users that sometimes are using it depending on where they are in the project. They need to be able to move the software, install it, uninstall it on various users' desktops. So they need a flexible licensing, and it has to be easy of use with that many users. They want to be able to have a very basic training and allow them, the users, to be able to run this analysis. And the users are generally CAMs or project controllers. They're not risk management specialists. So when they open up RiskyProject and we've installed RiskyProject Lite into the application, it will install the add-in, and you'll see it. They will see it as a ribbon in the Microsoft Project interface. See it right there. So when they're doing their analysis, sorry, my animation's not working out exactly as I wanted. They have to set up their project settings, so that we can read the data. The RiskyProject calculation engine can read the data. One of the things is running the calculations. It tells you how many iterations are going to run up during the simulation. I've got it set for 2,000. That's probably a bit larger than normal. Typically, we see it anywhere between 500 to 1,000. They can set it for convergence, but I don't. When they're doing reports, generally they have a requirement to run at a certain amount of iterations. They can set what their percentiles are when we're looking at low and high results that come out. We have two columns always that say low and high, and they can set it at what they're going to set their margin or contingency, or whatever level they're looking at. On the high side, we've got it as P80. Also, they need to set up the mapping, so they'll set up the mapping. And once this is set up, it becomes a default setting, so they only have to do it once. And in this one, they are going to have duration 1 and duration 2 in this particular one, but it can be any of the duration fields. There's up to 10 duration fields. They're not really interested in costs, so they can leave those alone. If they have projects in progress, we can say what those remaining durations are, where we're going to put them. And in here, we're going to use the same fields, but they could record them in different ones, and if we could pull that data out from a different duration fields. And at the bottom is, in terms of increasing the speed of the simulations amount of data, especially on some of these extremely large projects, when we pull the data out, we want to make sure that we can streamline it as much as possible. So we can, at the bottom here, we can indicate what type of information we want to exclude from this. And we're excluding everything except for the very basic information that we need to run a scheduled risk assessment. So if they, as part of their analysis, they're going to have to add data, 3-point estimates. So they're using aleatory, so they're using a low and high, and their duration is considered their most likely. And they want to populate the duration 1 and duration 2. They can do it manually, but they do have to populate this column right here, and we've mapped it to text 11. And this one shows all of the statistical distribution data. In particular, if you're looking at this one right here, this is saying the distribution in hours, low, medium, most likely, and high. This is a seed number, and this is a distribution type, which is triangular. That has to be populated, and they populate that using the dialog box over here. There are some users who actually have VBA that and code that will actually generate that automatically. But if they're using our software, they can select activities and give them and generate or calculate low and high estimates based on coefficients and assign a distribution type. In this case, it's a triangular, and it'll give a little illustration of that right there. So once they've done that, they can set up their risk model. They can just calculate it. And once it runs that simulation, it'll get this project information will come up, and it says we've done it. And here is that high-level information. We only have schedule information, so we can see finish time and duration for the project as a whole. And we can see that in terms of start time, finish times. And this is, as I mentioned, we set P80 as the high, so this is our P80 value here, current schedule. So they might set the schedule margin is the difference between these two values. But they're not really all that interested in reporting at the project level, especially on very big projects, which are multi-years, can go 5 to 10 years. They want to generate reports on particular deliverables. Sorry, and there we go. And they can do that by, so right here we're going to take a look at task results. They can select an activity. So it could be any one of these large deliverables, phase gates, stage gates. And they can click on one and then click the histogram, and we'll bring that data up. And they can copy and paste this data, select an activity, and they can copy and paste it, or they can print it out. They also are interested in sensitivity to finish time for particular activities. And that can come out. I haven't seen any of them that they're using the scatter plots. The scatter plot would show project finish time or task finish time versus project finish time or duration, or project cost versus, but again, they're not using it that way. What they do, however, is use the statistical report. Now in RiskyProject Lite, they don't have access to the PowerPoint. They only have access to the export to PowerPoint. They only have access to this report. But this report was developed specifically for these types of users. And what it does is that they can select multiple activities and will automatically generate this type of report. So we're looking at one activity here, and this is for finish time, and we can include some statistical information, ranges, and we can include percentiles as well as part of that. It can also include a sensitivity analysis, sensitivity to finish time, tornado chart as part of the report. So that's really what they're doing. It's very simple. They're not actually, they very rarely actually go into our desktop software. They're using almost exclusively the Addin. They're using RiskyProject Lite because it has the Addin that comes with it. That's really all they need to be able to run this schedule risk assessment. Now, this one is the RiskyProject Professional. So this is an energy utility company. They are doing integrated cost and schedule. What they're trying to develop is a risk-adjusted schedule margin and cost contingency. They're also going to identify, assess, and manage risks. Schedules are in Microsoft Project and P6. Again, Microsoft Project 2010 would be the earliest version they have. Depending on which group they're in, there's some variety. They could be in different places. Some are even using Primavera, but they can bring that data in as XML. They're using resource, and some are and cost-loaded plans. Not all of them, but not all of them are using the cost, but almost all of them are using resources to generate time-dependent costs. And they use a variety of Monte Carlo and risk register reports. So typically they might start off in Microsoft Project. They would have their application schedule open, and again they're going to map. They have to map as they did using the Addin. And right here, but the difference between our previous user groups is that they are going to ensure that they're bringing over any costs or resources. And now using any one of these buttons here, it's not particularly straightforward in terms of what it's saying here, but if you click on any of these buttons here, it will open up and automatically export the project to RiskyProject. So that will bring over, we've mapped high and low estimates for uncertainties. The precedent network, we can actually see the resources are there. We'll also bring in the resources, which we showed. And in this one, they have a drilling crew. They have two of that, and that will include the type, and it will include rates, which are not shown here, but they'll have rates to determine time-dependent costs. And they also are a big user of cost-type resources, which are basically a resource that can be assigned to one or many activities, but each activity, a unique cost can be assigned to each activity. So it doesn't work based on that rate. It's not really a time-dependent cost at all. But that's how they're being able to bring in these costs that they want as resources. Now they are also bringing in some fixed costs. They can bring in fixed costs as part of that. And again, it has 3-point uncertainties on this. But what we're trying to show here is that they're being able to, they have all of this data in Microsoft Project, and they're being able to export it directly into RiskyProject. Now, if they want to, they can go back to this button will appear, and this means that the two files are now linked. So the Microsoft Project schedule data with all of its information is now linked to the RiskyProject data. So if they click that button, it will go back to Microsoft Project. They can make updates if they want to here, and they'll go back and it will update it in RiskyProject. And what it will do is we have an algorithm that will take a look and say, have there been any new activities? It's using a unique task ID, a UID or a GUID to see what's happening. And all of our risk information about that task are associated at the GUID, so the RiskyProject risk information and the Microsoft Project schedule information, they're linked at the GUID level, and and we use it for the project name versus project name. So we want to keep the names linked, and then we do run an analysis when we export it back in, so we update it correctly. Now, it could be that they want to add durations or update the estimates in RiskyProject, and once they've updated it, exported it into RiskyProject, they can do that using set low high durations, and they can do it using coefficients again. So this is similar to what we've seen in the Addin. It has a bit more detail in it. And once we've added that, we can set the triangular again, and it will recalculate it based on those parameters coefficients that we put in. Now they're also using risks, and they're assigning risks. So the other source of uncertainty or variance is going to be from risk events, and they're characterized by a probability and impact. and that's on the risk ribbon. And we can see that up here. And then we have the various views on here. This is the administration. These are a few things where we can import, export risk, or disable, and these are details about particular risks. So if we look down here, they've added, we haven't calculated, we haven't run a simulation yet, so we're not seeing the scores, but we can see that we've assigned these risks, and we can see how they've been assigned. This one's to 3 tasks or resources. And then they can use these icons up here to navigate through a particular risk to see the information that's behind that they're using for the risk management. So they have risk information. That includes various metadata. It can include the cost of risk, who's involved, what the strategies are, open or close, or parts of the risk life cycle. They are also, you can look at the risk assignment. It can be done here. Risk assignment can be done here. It's a quick way to go through and see how it's being assigned. And the mitigation plans. Now the mitigation plans, they put one in here. It includes the cost and total cost of the mitigation plans, pre and post mitigation cubes. Those mitigation plans that they'll have them all set up in a common view called the mitigation and response view. That can include mitigation plans, which are activities that will bring down the probability and or impact of a risk. And we also have responses, which you might definitionally, there's a question about that. There could be a response plan is a risk, it's contingency that happens after a risk occurs. So if a risk occurs, they're going to truck this water in from a remote source. So if they have a problem with the water and it's going to cost, it'll have a cost of a certain amount of money. And this, during the simulations, these response plans are run, they are like a risk impact, and they're run probabilistically. Every time the risk occurs during an iteration, and they will run this response plan. The value of having response plans as opposed to just having a probability and impact is that they can be assigned to multiple risks. So if you have a risk response that's going to be a contingency for multiple risks, you'll be able to use one sort of response plan as a contingency for multiple risks. You can use that as a single action that's going to occur, contingency based on if those risks occur. So once they've run a simulation, they're using in RiskyProject Professional. Again, they're interested in all of the data. In particular, they want to look at cost and finish time. They can set up at the project summary level. They'll set it up. They're looking at P80. They are setting their baselines, I believe, at P50 or mean. And so the difference for margin and contingency is going to be the difference between the mean, let's say right here, and on cost and P80. So there's a gap between those, and we can see that right here. Between here and here would be their cost contingency at the highest level, at the project level. But again, they're going to be looking at it probably at the activity level. So if they run it, they got the result Gantt, and one of the things that result Gantt does is allows us, if we set up our high as our P80, we can actually start to see the difference between these, and these can start to be our scheduled margins that we're going to set As a best practice, we want to put schedule margin in at the deliverable level or activity level rather than having margin for the entire project. So once an activities or a deliverable is complete, that margin is retired. So we don't tag it on to the end, because then we'll start to get a huge amount of slack especially if you're on time. They'll do the same with cost analysis. Again, they can take a look here and they can see what their mean cost is versus their high cost, and then that can be the cost contingency, again, at the particular activity level. They also use some sensitivity analysis, not all of them, but some are using sensitivity analysis to take a look at which are the main drivers for cost in the system. In this one, we're looking at cost and task cost. How much task cost is a driver for overall project cost? And we can see here that this particular activity, ID 19, is drilling. So obviously we have 3 drilling activities, and they're the main drivers. But this one is going to has sort of 40% of the variance, driving 40% of the variance or uncertainty that in cost for the system. So when they're looking at managing, they're going to be looking at these activities first to be able to see if there's any way that they can minimize the impact of uncertainties and risk events on it. So in terms of reporting on the risk side, they can use the risk register view, can be reported on, it can be set up depending on, I'm not exactly sure how they're using the risk register other than something like this where they might prioritize it. I think I've seen some of the groups have done some customization on the risk register. Some are just using out of the box, but obviously they're going to use this to prioritize risks. They're also using our risk matrix reports. So here's a risk matrix, and we're seeing pre and post. We have some mitigation plans on 2 of the risks, and we can see these arrows are indicating pre and post mitigation stances of the risk, where the risks are going to be, or we plan them to be. They're also using a risk monitor on some of the reports, which shows how many risks are in each cell of the risk matrix at the current time. This isn't actually one of them. We don't have any historical data in this particular example, but they haven't changed, but there's what's called the risk trend, and we can show the differences in how many risks are in the system and how they're changing over time, the number and severity. And a similar look, but on a grid view, is called the risk history. And again, it shows us over a certain amount of months or periods how many risks have been in the system, what their ranking was. They are also use the what we call the risk register report, and it is a detailed report on each risk in the system. It can be customized. Includes these. You can see here the pre and post mitigation cubes, and depending on how much data that you have in there, all of it can be included. But it is it has a lot of information, and it provides a good archive and record of what's happened to that risk over time. The other one that they use that I was surprised, and I don't see it commonly used, but now ever since I saw them using it, I was like, wow, I should recommend that other people use it. And it is the report all risk. This is a report that we generated or created several years ago, say many years ago, but when we first introduced or launched the product, We didn't have a risk register. We had limited reporting, but we wanted to have a report for the risk without that risk register. And we had the risk report. What they're using it for is during risk reviews, when they want to look at how they're modeling this risk in the system, they can very simply look at this table right here, and it tells you exactly and it tells you what the probability and impact type is, what the distribution is, and allows them to quickly go over there and discuss, and if they have to, update how those risks are being assigned to the system, into the model, I should say. And what I found in the past couple of years, it's actually very useful and simple to use tool when you're going into a risk review. If people have questions about this, this can be brought up very quickly. We can remove these risk properties from it, so if we just want to see the risk assigned, and they can go over those and justify them based on whatever information they have. And like I said, they could change them, but it does give a very quick and easy way to understand why we're seeing the results that they are regarding the risks. So the last case study is RiskyProject Enterprise. So if this is a nonprofit organization, they have lots of projects. Primarily, they're trying to do risk management. They don't have a lot of use or requirements to do simulations like Monte Carlo simulations, cost and schedule. But they do have multiple projects, and they have multiple risk registers. They need a collaborative environment. They have offices, in several different continents, and they need user management to be able to manage all the users and that collaboration. And they need risk management at the project, program, and portfolio level. So this is RiskyProject Professional when it's in licensing is in enterprise mode. What it does is it comes up and it adds additional views and a project or a ribbon. It's called projects as opposed to schedule. And each one of these, we can create a hierarchy of projects. So each one of this is a summary project. You can consider it a program with various projects underneath. Projects can be qualitative or quantitative. So quantitative are these ones that we have these green, we have these values here. And those are just telling us based on simulations what the level of risk is for cost, basically cost and schedule. And these ones are qualitative. Now they're using, because they don't need to do Monte Carlo simulations, they don't really need RiskyProject Professional or even Lite. They just need access to a risk register. And because of that, what we did is we extracted our risk register from the desktop versions, and we have what's called the RiskyProject Risk Register module that's available with RiskyProject Enterprise. And what we're seeing right here is the same portfolio, but in the RiskyProject Risk Register. And the difference is that we don't have the schedule, the analysis, etc. We just have projects and risks. So all we do is have that project hierarchy, and we have the risk, which is the risk register. So as part of that, we have user management. User management allows them to set up various levels in an OBS, an organizational breakdown structure with a hierarchy. And this allows some inheritance of permissions and whatnot. Users we have 3 built-in roles right now. Administrator has access to everything. A manager is generally going to have access ability to modify almost everything, with the exception of adding users. But they may be limited to particular sections of the portfolio. And users will have a limited access. Typically, a user is not going to be able to add or delete projects or risks or issues. They have project permissions. So additional permissions is that, and what we're seeing right here is we have our list of users, and the PMO office has access. Everyone in that has access to this region, and all of these would have access to all of these projects or nodes below that, whereas the operations manager and their group do not have access to that. So we can limit access to various nodes within the portfolio. In addition, there's a notification manager. It's basically to help with communication. When particular events occur within the system, we can send off email messages to various users identified in the system or in the system. This is just a very simple one, but if the risk is added, it goes, depending on where it is, it will go to the manager of that particular node project. If a risk closed, the same. And these are just various different types of actions that can occur. In this one right here, we've got a risk review, and we're going to send 2 different notifications on the 1 week before and the day before that. We're going to send it out to the owner to make sure that they're ready for that risk review. So what do? They're using the risk register. This is the portfolio risk register that they have. These risks are being, they're looking at all the risks in the system we have. Just in this part, we can see this greenhouse projects. We have a construction project where these risks have been assigned. So they can look at it at this level. And one of the things is if we don't have a marker up, well, we don't have anything open up there, this means we're looking at a portfolio level. So if they're looking at the portfolio, what that means is that their portfolio, they can have RiskyProject Risk Register to look at these qualitative projects, and they can use RiskyProject Professional if they need to run a Monte Carlo simulation. So all of these modules, all of these desktop clients can act as clients to the RiskyProject Enterprise server. So depending on the needs, and that does mean that the risk register is at a much reduced price as opposed to what the RiskyProject Professional costs. In addition to that, each node, each project, or it could be user groups, it could be programs, can have their own risk settings. They can have their own risk register set up depending on what properties. They can have different risk matrices. So we could have a risk matrix set up for these particular region, and we could have a different risk matrix and risk scoring systems depending on what each particular group or project requires. So it gives you quite a bit of flexibility on how you're going to be managing your risk. What we do see a lot is that when you go from the project level up to the portfolio level, the type of risk and the risk properties and how the risk registers are set up and the scoring can be quite different. So for reporting, on the I've just included this for quantitative. They're doing a very simple one. They again, they're not doing it all that often. The only one thing that they do seem to have liked and taken into account is the 3x3 dashboard, which gives you a quick overview of what your 3 most critical risks are for cost and schedule, and your 3 most important or crucial activities, which ones activities are most likely to land on the critical path or have the most impact on costs in your project plan. They also use a risk rater. Typically, they're using a different risk scoring than the out-of-the-box one. I don't know if you can see here, but they're using a 1 to 5 scoring method that gives you a risk score that goes anywhere from 0 up to 25. That scoring method can be changed depending on how that risk matrix is set up. They're using the risk matrix, they're using the risk trend, and they're using the risk report as part of that. And these reports are being generated at every node in their project. So each project they'll be able to pull out, or each program at a program level if they're managing risk there, or even at the portfolio, they'll be using these sort of standard set of they're using the standard set of risk reports as part of their process. So that's the end of our webinar today. I hope it gave you some ideas about what or how the software is being used, the various versions are being used. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them right now. If not, I'd like to thank you very much for attending, and if you do have any questions that you'd like to take offline, you can contact me at mtrumper@entabler.com or give me a phone call. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. This webinar will be posted on our website within the next 48 hours. And I don't see any questions coming in. Well, thank you very much, and please enjoy your summer. And look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.